segment, I feel that the purpose of African American History Week to month, now looking at it at the brink of the 21st century, is still very important as it was then to now. And I think if we were having a conversation with Dr. Carter G. Woodson presently, he would still feel that, oh my gosh, there's still very strong need to have an emphasis on getting people to learn more about the contributions that were made by African Americans earlier, to try to deal with a lot of the social issues and concerns and problems that exist today. I think he would probably be looking down on it, shedding buckets of tears, because he probably doesn't feel he's bridged that gap, as he probably thought about the miseducation of the Negro at that earlier time period, and on the brink of it being African American History Week to it being a month, and now the 21st century. One might ask, given after the baby boomers and that thrust of education, what would have happened with the Generation Xers and now the millennials born in the 90s to the present? Are they coming in with a certain level of awareness? And as we entered that last segment, that was the issue that we dealt with at Harvard, wondering, what about this group that's going to be born? Will they have some sense of identity about what had happened just 30 years prior, 40 years prior, as we did the film out Selma, and as we're getting ready to celebrate the 50th anniversary in March. Groups of people even from Nashville are traveling to Selma to walk across the bridge on Bloody Sunday. To what degree will you have a busloads of youth, of they say students that are 18, 19 to 21 aware of it enough to want to be a part of that? Or has that history been lost? So when that history is lost with a group, I think Dr. Carter G. Woodson would agree, and the reason he's shedding these buckets of tears, metaphorically, is that he probably sensed that there's been a disconnect, even today, with that. And then when you have that disconnect, then you see other problems with voting. Are there going to be a thrust of people wanting to really be active voters and see the political process as an aspect of activism and bringing about change? They want to go in with education, another institution, as he would have had a strong thrust to say, we're going to work real hard and have values of higher education and work hard while we were here, regardless of our social class, that coming into the institution that we're going to leave, you know, different than we were when we came. I want to look at economics. I want to ask the question, well, where are African Americans in the whole economic process? The middle class right now, and see that things have been a bit deplorable. They are not as large as they were when children now in college looking at their parents. It's going to be much more difficult in this technological telecommunication society in which we're living in. And I think some of that, as we look at it institutionally, is connected to what he referred to as that miseducation. It's still very present today as it was then, because we had a sense of that history. I think by and large, people will go at it in a different way. Now, I'm not trying to reduce it to just the African American experience. I want us to understand that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, as well as Du Bois, as well as Thurgood Marshall, Andrew Young, Dr. Martin Luther King, everyone in that forefront of bringing about a movement did something that helped all people within America to be better citizens and America to be a better America. Because if you didn't have that Civil Rights Act, you didn't have that Voting Rights Act, you wouldn't have had Title X. Institutions of higher education just weren't fair to women and say, well, we want to let women just have academic and student scholarships like they did for the men. It was because of the civil rights movement that caused that act to come about to give opportunities for women. When you go into places of business, males would have always had that opportunity. It was that whole civil rights movement that allowed women to have equal opportunities to be on the air, even here at this place that we are talking today, to be on newscasts, to be able to be the next president of the United States. All of those acts helped our society and our institutions to become a better place for democracy. So I think when we look at these contributions from the past to the present, looking at the brink of the 21st century and the importance of African American History Month, it's real important that we understand those contributions as more than just celebrating the contributions from slavery to freedom, but also constitutional changes that has impacted our entire society, that has helped everyone cherish from it. So I think when he looked at that whole idea of the miseducation, you probably can see how other ethnic groups that are coming that are not informed about those contributions can very easily be misinformed and would say, well, look, we've just been here 2 generations and my parents couldn't speak the language and now I've gone to an institution of higher education, economic, and I'm doing well. Well, what about that other group? What is their excuse? And they could take a very conservative view on looking at things politically and vote against something like affirmative action that is still very present, that not only helped African Americans, but it helped women to have opportunities as well. But people could be very swayed looking at that if they don't know the history. Hence, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation. So I think this History Month is a time to reflect on that. As I hope it's a time for institutions and other issues like that will be brought to bear so people can discuss it. I would hope it to be a time of someone looking at your program and parents will go back and say, hey, let me reflect and let me tell my kids about my grandparents, great-grandparents, and that history, because it's important for them to know that and not to be embarrassed about it, but they were able to have the fruits of all of that struggle so that we could be, as a society, where we are today. And those contributions need to be shared. And we live in this telecommunications society today where there's no excuse, because on the smartphones, if you're using it in a smart way, you could know about the information.
Almost anything.
Anything you want to know. Yes, yes. Right before I walked in, I just said, let me just curiously, Google Dr. And it has, you can go to the library, and see things. So we're living in an age where we should have a huge increase in knowledge about these contributions. But sadly to say, there's a strong sense there's a decrease in information and certainly a sense of consciousness of kind of African Americans today to say, well, because I have this feeling of consciousness, I'm going to see the film Selma. Or because I have this sense of consciousness, I'm going to do better than the past generations that were here to try to improve myself and to contribute to the American society, or to understand African History Month and try to share it in a way of breaking down white supremacy racism in a society where that's still very prevalent. So I think all of these things were at a time period of many of the baby boomers. But now it seems like it's just dying out. And that was one of the issues we had at Harvard University, and looking at this whole issue of looking at the social movement, how we can improve economics, how we can improve voting rights, how we can get people to be motivated to do and to have a sense that they have something to vote for, and not that they have this false sense of reality that everything is just fine for them. So it's a huge problem, as it was in the 19th and 20th century as it is right now. So I think it's a very important month to try to look at it. It happens to be the shortest month of the year, but it's a month that I think our institutions need to recognize it. And you can see it if you're watching the National Basketball Association. Even at the last All-Star game, they did a wonderful job of having the shirts to recognize it. So you're seeing certain institutions like that, in the entertainment institution, recognizing it. Hence, I think he would be shedding, a big smile, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, looking down on how that came into fruition, that we have all these international National Basketball Association players, and they are walking around with a shirt on celebrating it, and they are reaching out to communities, doing projects, doing it, and that's what we need to do in our communities as well.
And so finally, you would say that African American History Month, Negro History Week, whatever you call it, is very, very important in terms